Choi was one of 7?
Choi was one of 7. That was the entire message. No sender name, no explanation, no threat. Just 7 words. And a timestamp that made Naomi Williams Park's blood run cold, because that message had been routed through a diplomatic server, not a criminal network, not a burner phone, a government-adjacent digital corridor used by people with immunity, people who didn't need to threaten you, because they already controlled the room you were standing in. In part 1 of this story, Naomi walked into a world she didn't fully understand and chose to love Joon-hyuk Park anyway. In part 2, she proved she was not the weakness everyone assumed she was. She dismantled the Park Syndicate's most dangerous internal threat. She stood in that ballroom and won. But winning exposed her. And what she was about to discover, what they were both about to discover, was that the Park Syndicate had never been the ceiling. It had only ever been the floor. This is part 3. This is 7 Kings. To understand why that message shattered everything, we have to go back a little. Before we go any further, if you are new here, welcome. And if you have been riding with us since part 1, you already know what this channel is about. Real stories, real depth, real love that does not ask permission to exist. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on all notifications so you never miss a new story. We drop new Afro-Korean love stories every single week, and every one of them goes exactly this deep. And I want to ask you something before we continue. Drop it in the comments right now. Where are you watching from? I want to see the full map of this community. Whether you are in Georgia or Liverpool, Atlanta or London, Singapore or Dubai or somewhere in between, tell me where you are. Because this story touches 7 cities, and I have a feeling this community stretches just as far. Drop your city, drop your country, and let's see where love finds its audience. Now, back to Naomi and Joon-hyuk. After the events of part 2, Naomi had transitioned from behind-the-scenes strategist to something harder to categorize. She was legally Joon-hyuk's wife, ethically his equal partner, and operationally his most dangerous asset. And she was exhausted in the way that only people carrying invisible weight ever are. She still called her mother every Sunday. She still kept a journal. She still made jollof rice when the Seoul apartment felt too cold and too quiet, because some rituals belong to the woman you were before the world got complicated. But she was also running metadata analysis at 3 in the morning on a message that shouldn't exist, because Naomi Williams Park had learned slowly and with great emotional cost that love and strategy were not opposites. They were the same muscle, and right now, both were telling her the same thing. This isn't over. This is just beginning. Park Joon-hyuk's older sister, Park Ji-yeon, had warned him once, years ago, that Choi's interest in him was too deliberate. Men like Choi don't invest without a return, she'd said, standing in the family kitchen with her arms crossed and her voice low. He hadn't listened. He loved Choi the way sons love complicated fathers, fully, blindly, and with the particular ache of a man who wanted to deserve the attention. That faith had fractured in part 2. Now, standing at the window with the city humming 32 floors below him, Joon-hyuk was living inside a question he couldn't fully articulate yet. If Choi built me, who did he build me for? He was not a sentimental man by nature. He was precise, controlled, wired for decision-making under pressure. But the events of the last year had stripped several of his certainties away, and what remained was something rawer and more honest. A man who had chosen love over legacy, chosen Naomi over every structural expectation placed on him, and who was now realizing that choice had made them both a target at a level neither had prepared for. While Naomi traced the signal path of a 7-word message through 4 proxy servers and 1 diplomatic relay station, Joon-hyuk stood at that window and finally asked the question out loud, to no one, in the dark. What exactly were you protecting, Choi? The message had arrived at 2:31 a.m. on a Thursday. Naomi had been awake anyway. She often was these days, reviewing quarterly compliance reports for Park Global Logistics, the restructured, legitimized company she and Joon-hyuk had been building from the syndicate's bones. She'd seen the notification appear in a secure channel she monitored, but rarely used. An anonymous relay. Encrypted twice over, she'd almost dismissed it. Then she'd read it. Choi was one of 7. She didn't call Joon-hyuk immediately. That was the first thing to understand about Naomi. She processed before she reacted. She traced the message's routing path first. 1 server in Zurich, 1 relay in Singapore, 1 diplomatic node she recognized from her Interpol consulting days. A server used almost exclusively by state-adjacent financial coordination bodies. Not criminal networks, not hackers, institutions. The message hadn't come from someone hiding. It had come from someone choosing to be seen. Precisely, partially, deliberately seen. By the time Joon-hyuk appeared in the doorway at 3:08 a.m., drawn by the glow of her screens from the hallway, she had already begun building the map. Naomi. Sit down, she said. Not coldly, carefully. He sat. He looked at the map on her largest screen. Nodes across 7 countries: Seoul, Tokyo, Singapore, Lagos, Dubai, London, New York, connected by lines that pulsed like a circulatory system. Is that what I think it is? He asked. It's what Choi was connected to, she said. Not reporting to, connected to. Peer level, maybe, which means the syndicate wasn't the organization, he finished. His voice was very quiet. It was a subsidiary. They sat with that for a moment. Outside, Seoul was doing what Seoul did at 3 a.m., humming, moving, never fully sleeping. Somewhere below them, a delivery truck was making its rounds. Somewhere in this same city, legitimate business was being conducted by people who would never know that the infrastructure supporting their world had an invisible second layer. Joon-hyuk reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. Not romantically, steadyingly. The gesture of a partner who has learned that presence matters more than words in the first minutes of a crisis. Who sent it? He asked. I don't know yet, she said. But they wanted me to find what I found. The routing wasn't careless. It was curated. Someone warning us, or evaluating us, she said. The evaluation came faster than either expected. 48 hours after the message arrived, a Park Global Logistics shipment, fully legitimate, fully documented, legal cargo en route from Incheon to Rotterdam, was seized at the port of entry. No criminal charge filed. No contraband found. Just a sudden, unexplained regulatory hold issued through a multilateral trade monitoring body. Joon-hyuk's legal team spent 6 hours trying to identify the mechanism. They couldn't. The freeze hadn't come from any single country. It had come from a coordination layer between countries. An institutional pressure point that most trade attorneys didn't know existed. This was not criminal retaliation. This was something older, something more patient. Something that didn't need to threaten you because it had already embedded itself in the systems you needed to survive. They're not attacking us, Naomi said, standing at the glass wall of Joon-hyuk's Seoul office, watching the Han River in the afternoon gray. They're introducing themselves. Joon-hyuk looked at her. What's the difference? She turned. The difference, Ro, she said, is that an attack wants you dead. An introduction wants you useful. Here's where the story expands, because what the 7-word message unlocked wasn't just a threat. It was a door, and on the other side of that door was a version of the world that Naomi and Joon-hyuk had been living inside without knowing it. A world where power didn't announce itself, where influence moved through infrastructure rather than headlines, and where the people who shaped global economic reality were not elected, not famous, and not particularly interested in being found. Naomi spent 3 weeks reconstructing Choi Woo-sung's actual role within what she was beginning to call, in her private notes, in careful language, the Consortium. Not the Park Syndicate, above the Park Syndicate. What she found changed the shape of everything she thought she understood. Choi had not been a crime boss with political connections. He had been an architect, one of 7 individuals who had, over approximately 30 years, constructed a parallel economic infrastructure. Transnational, legally diffuse, academically invisible, the consortium didn't traffic in narcotics or weapons. Those were crude tools for crude minds. It trafficked in access, port authorities, regulatory bodies, financial coordination layers, the invisible machinery that made global trade function, and, when necessary, stop functioning. Choi had been the Korean node, and the Korean node had produced Joon-hyuk Park. Not by accident. Joon-hyuk found the files on a Friday afternoon, buried in an archive drive he'd recovered from Choi's private office after Part 2's resolution. He'd been delaying opening them, the way you delay opening something you know will cost you. He sat alone and read for 4 hours, every mentorship moment, every career opportunity Choi had placed in his path, every introduction, every lesson about pressure, patience, scale. It had been a curriculum, not a relationship. Choi had been building him the way you build infrastructure, piece by piece, load-bearing, intentional. Joon-hyuk had been designed to be elevated into the consortium at the appropriate moment, not to run a legitimate company, not to fall in love with a Black American financial analyst and go clean, to scale the syndicate's model into something transnational. He hadn't told Naomi he was reading them. She came home to find him sitting in the dark office, the screens off, the files closed, his hands flat on the desk like a man trying not to tip over. Joon-hyuk. Silence. Joon-hyuk, talk to me. A long moment, then, I wasn't mentored, he said. His voice was completely flat. I was manufactured. She sat across from him. She didn't rush. She waited. He knew what he was making, Joon-hyuk continued. And I wanted it. I wanted to be what he saw. I thought that was love. Naomi looked at him for a long time. Then, quietly, that is love, she said. It just wasn't mutual. The contact came through her professional network, a name she hadn't encountered before. Ayo Okonkwo, Nigerian-British, 38. Affiliated, on paper, with a London-based economic policy consultancy. Affiliated, beneath the paper, with networks touching the Lagos Port Authority, several West African sovereign wealth structures, and, as Naomi confirmed within 6 hours of receiving his message, the outer ring of the consortium itself. He requested a meeting, not in Seoul, not in London, in Singapore. Neutral ground, he said. She spent 48 hours deciding whether to go. Joon-hyuk spent those 48 hours arguing that she shouldn't. You don't know what he wants, Joon-hyuk said. They were in the kitchen. It was early morning. The argument had the controlled tension of 2 people who had learned to fight without shouting, which is, in some ways, more frightening than shouting. I know exactly what he wants, she said. He wants to see if I'm as good as whatever file they have on me. And if you are, then we have a conversation worth having. Naomi, Joon-hyuk. Her voice was patient. Staying invisible is no longer an option. They already see us. The question is what we do with being seen. He didn't have an answer for that. Not one that was better than hers. She went to Singapore. Ayo Okonkwo was not what Naomi had prepared herself for. She had prepared for calculated intimidation. What she received was something closer to recognition. He turned when she entered, looked at her with the particular attention of someone who has read a file and is now calibrating it against the reality. You dismantled a node, he said. No greeting. That makes you visible. I'm aware, she said. She sat down. He didn't for a moment. Then he did. The consortium doesn't eliminate visible problems, he said. It incorporates them or isolates them. You're in the first category. For now. And if I stay in that category? He studied her. Then you need to understand what you're actually dealing with, he said. Not the syndicate, not even Choi, the architecture beneath both of them. He opened a folder, clean data, clean language, devastating implications. 7 architects, he said, 30 years of construction and 1 empty seat. Naomi looked at the folder, then at him. Why are you telling me this? Ayo held her gaze. Because I'm the Lagos node, he said simply. And I've been watching the consortium get older, smaller, and more afraid. That's not a system. That's an institution in decline. He paused. I think you know what a new model could look like. I think your husband does too. Naomi sat very still for a moment. You're not threatening us, she said quietly. You're recruiting us. A slight incline of his head. I'm proposing, he said, that the world is about to change, regardless. The question is whether the people building the next infrastructure are people like us, or people like the ones who built this. Okay, let's pause right here, because we are deep in it now, and I need a second with you. Naomi just sat across from a man who is simultaneously connected to the same network that tried to destroy her, and offering her a seat at the table that runs that network. And Joon-hyuk is back in Seoul, discovering that his entire identity as a businessman was architected by someone who saw him as infrastructure. If this story is hitting you, if you are in it, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. We drop new Afro-Korean love stories every week, and each one goes this deep. And drop a comment. Who do you trust more right now, Ayo or your own gut instinct about him? I genuinely want to know. All right, back to Singapore, because what Naomi brings home to Joon-hyuk is about to fracture something between them for the first time in a long time. Naomi told him everything. She sat at their kitchen table with her Singapore notes spread between them and walked him through every word Ayo had said. The consortium structure, the 7 nodes, the empty seat, the proposition. She was precise, she was thorough, and she watched his face the entire time. What she saw was not fear. What she saw was something that, in 18 months of marriage, she had only seen in fragments. Refusal. No, Joon-hyuk said, before she had even finished. Joon-hyuk? Naomi, they built me to do exactly this, to be exactly the kind of person who finds a way to justify entering that system. Don't you see that? Whatever Ayo is offering, that's the architecture working. That's Choi's plan, still running, even from wherever Choi is now. She was quiet for a moment. Then, or, she said carefully, it's the architecture being disrupted by someone who grew up inside it and doesn't want to pass it on. You don't know that Ayo is legitimate. I don't know that he isn't. The silence between them had weight. This was new territory. Not an emotional argument, not a cultural misunderstanding, not the accumulated pressure of life-threatening external forces. This was something more fundamental. 2 people who had chosen each other, who had proven their loyalty to each other through fire, now disagreeing about strategy at the highest possible level. I want to destroy them, Joon-hyuk said. His voice was very controlled. I want to expose the network, dismantle the infrastructure, and make sure no one can use it the way it was used on us. And then what? She asked. Power doesn't disappear, Joon-hyuk. It reorganizes. If we destroy the network without replacing it with something better, something worse fills the space. We've both seen that movie. He stood up, walked to the window. The argument didn't resolve that night. It was the first night in a long time that the distance between them wasn't geographical. 40 miles outside Seoul, in a facility managed by a private security contractor, loyal to the new park corporate structure. The sniper from the Part 2 ballroom was still alive. He had been alive for months. He had refused to talk about his employer, about the chain of command, about anything that touched the syndicate. He was a professional. He understood the cost of talking. But the shipping seizure changed his calculation. When Joon-hyuk's security team brought him the news about the Rotterdam hold, framed not as a threat but as context, something shifted in the sniper's eyes, because the Rotterdam mechanism was familiar to him. He'd been promised access to it. Not money, not protection. Access. A financial immunity network, the term he used with the deliberate precision of someone repeating something they were told in exactly those words, that could erase identity across borders. New documentation, new digital trail, new citizenship, functionally, in a system that ran parallel to sovereign nations. They called it the clean layer, the sniper said. His voice was flat and exhausted. You do what they need done. You get access. You can disappear from any system in the world. Joon-hyuk sat across from him and said nothing for a long moment. Who offered it to you? The sniper looked at him. Someone who told me Choi Woo-sung used it twice, he said. And that Choi Woo-sung was one of 7 people who ran it. Joon-hyuk drove home and told Naomi what he'd learned. She listened without expression. Then she said the thing she'd been circling for days. Joon-hyuk, this isn't crime. This is governance, shadow governance. And you can't bomb a form of governance. You can only replace it. He sat across from her at the kitchen table, and for the first time since Singapore, he was quiet in a different way. Not resistant, listening. Within 2 weeks of the Singapore meeting, 3 things happened in rapid sequence. Park Global Logistics' primary banking relationship, a Tier 1 institution with South Korean government backing, received a regulatory inquiry from a multilateral financial monitoring body. The inquiry was polite, procedural, and utterly baseless. But it froze new credit lines for 31 days. A media piece appeared in a prominent financial publication, sourced anonymously, suggesting that Park Global Logistics' restructuring had been cosmetic, that its legitimacy was theater. The piece was careful enough to avoid actionable defamation. It was designed purely to introduce doubt. And a regulatory shutdown application was filed through a jurisdictional mechanism that Naomi had never encountered before, targeting Park Global's Singapore transit license. The mechanism appeared to originate from a multilateral trade compliance body based in Geneva that almost no one had heard of. This was not punishment. This was demonstration. The consortium was showing them the full instrument panel, every lever, every pressure point. The message was not, "We will destroy you." The message was, "This is what we can do, and you haven't seen half of it." They're not trying to break us, Naomi said, standing in the middle of their home office with 6 open screens around her. They're demonstrating capability. This is a negotiation tactic. It's a threat, Joon-hyuk said. Yes, she agreed, but it's a threat from someone who wants us at a table, not in a grave. There's a difference, and we can use that difference. The strategy debate had been contained, barely, to the professional realm. But 3 weeks in, it broke through into the personal. It was late. They'd been working for 14 hours. Naomi was sitting on the edge of the bed, and Joon-hyuk came in and sat beside her, and for a while, neither of them said anything. I'm scared, she said. Not of the consortium, of something more specific. Of what? He asked. That we're going to spend the next 20 years fighting something that can't be beaten by fighting, she said, and that the cost of that fight is going to be us. This. She gestured at the room, the life they'd built. He put his arm around her. They sat. Then we don't fight it that way, he said, quietly, carefully, as if he were arriving at the idea in real time. We change the terms. She turned to look at him. You're considering it, she said. Ayo's proposal. A long silence. I'm considering, Joon-hyuk said slowly, that Choi built me to serve a broken system, and that the only thing worse than becoming what he intended is wasting what he built. She looked at him for a long moment. What are you saying? I'm saying, he said, that if we're going to be visible, if that's what dismantling the syndicate cost us, then let's choose what we're visible as. They went together. Ayo Okonkwo met them at a private venue. Clean room, long table, 7 chairs. 6 of them held representatives of the consortium, not Ayo's full allies, but emissaries. Observers, people who had been watching Naomi and Joon-hyuk for months and had come to see the product of that watching. Choi's chair was empty. The offer was delivered without theater. 1 seat at the consortium's coordinating table. Structural access to the clean layer infrastructure. Sovereign adjacent protection across 6 jurisdictions. And then, the pressure point. Calibrated, deliberate, almost elegant. The seat was for one of them, not both. The room was very quiet. Naomi felt Joon-hyuk's hand under the table, not gripping hers. Just present. A reminder. She looked at the emissaries. She looked at Ayo, who she noticed had not been the one to deliver the 1-seat condition, who was, in fact, watching the emissaries with an expression she recognized. Disagreement contained. No, she said. The room adjusted. I want to be clear, she continued, that the 1-seat condition is not a negotiation tactic we're going to engage with. It's a compatibility test we're declining. The offer, an emissary began. The offer, Joon-hyuk said, as it's currently structured, assumes that one of us is the asset and one of us is the liability. That assumption is the problem with your entire architecture, and it's why your infrastructure is producing diminishing returns. Silence. Ayo across the table had the expression of a man trying very hard not to look satisfied. We're not here to take a seat, Naomi said. Her voice was level and complete. We're here to propose a redesign. The room didn't transform that afternoon. No handshakes, no signed agreements, no Hollywood resolution. What happened was more honest than that. The consortium's emissaries withdrew to consider. Ayo stayed behind. He told them, with the brevity of a man who chooses words by weight rather than volume, that the proposal they'd made, legitimate global infrastructure as replacement model, transparent coordination rather than shadow governance, the dismantling of the clean layers immunity architecture in favor of accountable alternatives, was not new as an idea. It was new as a viable offer. Because it required someone with inside knowledge of both the syndicate structure and the consortium's architecture, a legitimate business platform to build from, and the moral clarity to actually do it rather than theorize it. You're both exactly what this needs, Ayo said quietly. What they're afraid of is that you're right. In the weeks that followed, the institutional pressure on Park Global Logistics quietly eased. Not completely. Nothing this complex resolves completely. But the banking inquiry concluded with no finding. The Singapore transit license was reinstated. The media piece disappeared from search results with the quiet efficiency of something whose purpose had been served. And Naomi and Joon-hyuk began building something neither of them had a name for yet. Joon-hyuk called his sister Ji-yeon from Seoul one evening and told her, carefully, selectively, as much as he could share, that the chapter with Choi was closed. That he understood now what he'd been built for, and that he'd chosen something different. Ji-yeon was quiet for a long time. Are you okay? She asked finally. I'm becoming something better than okay, he said. They were not out of danger. The consortium had not accepted or rejected their proposal. It had considered it, which in institutional terms is its own kind of progress. Ayo Okonkwo remained a complicated ally, trustworthy in intent, embedded in a system they were trying to change, shaped by forces neither of them fully understood yet. And Joon-hyuk was still, some mornings, navigating the particular grief of a man who loved a mentor who had never fully loved him back. But they were together, strategically aligned, ideologically clarified, and choosing every day what they were building toward. The final image settled quietly around them, Naomi and Joon-hyuk at that long table, 7 chairs, 1 lit. The city of Singapore glittering beyond the glass, their hands close but not touching, each of them present, each of them whole. Power doesn't disappear, Naomi said quietly. It reorganizes. Joon-hyuk looked at the empty chair. Then let's redesign it. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment. If you were Naomi or Joon-hyuk, would you enter the consortium to change it or fight it from outside? There's no right answer. I want to see the debate. Thank you for spending time with us, for believing that love is strategic and sacred. I'll see you soon. Until then, keep loving boldly.